Now, in terms of story, Dead Space 3 actually takes place after the events of Dead Space 2, in which Ellie and Isaac have escaped from the incident on Titan Station, and since then, Isaac has been on the run and hunted down by the Unitologists who want to stop them from bringing forth Convergence, which is, you know, the judgment day of the Unitologists, and has become public enemy #1. It is soon after this that he's found by a group of colonist Marines, and they need his help in order to find Ellie, who has gone missing, looking for some answers involving the marker. Once they find Ellie in kind of a space graveyard in the orbiting of a frozen moon, they discover that this moon is actually the homeworld of the markers and where the signal seems to be generating from. So Isaac, along with Ellie and a bunch of other characters, travel to this moon in order to find the source of the markers, discover some ancient secrets as to who might have actually created the markers, and end the necromorph threat once and for all. I'm happy to say that after three mainstream games, Dead Space 3 definitely has the best story, simply because there are two different tones going into this. The first half of the game, you're just focusing on Ellie, and it's all in space, and it is told kind of like a typical drama between, you know, three characters, which I won't say. But once you get onto the planet, that's when stuff really gets intense, and you really start understanding the mysteries behind the world that revolves around the creation and distribution of the markers and their creation, the necromorphs. Now on to gameplay. Now, in terms of gameplay, for those of you who have actually played Dead Space 1 and 2, I can promise you that the combat and the movement feelings have not changed at all. So if you're a veteran of Dead Space, you're going to feel right at home. You'll be able to jump right in and start playing. The two main additions, however, are the weapon customization system. Unlike the first two games in which you would build up credits by killing enemies and opening crates, by stomping on them, of course, this time you have to actually build your weapons through resources that you will pick up. As you open crates and kill enemies, you will pick up certain items, customizable parts, certain weapon frames, certain extras, and you actually can build your guns. And you can actually combine two different guns at one time. So, for instance, if you wanted to combine, say, a line gun with a shotgun, you can do that. You want to add a plasma rifle to a line gun, you can do that. It's a really amazing customizable system and gives the players really almost unlimited options to what weapons you want to take to each scenario as you go further on through this game, in which it generally will get harder and you have to take on bigger groups of enemies the further on you go into the game. The second main addition to the gameplay is that the zero gravity sections are much more expanded. You're no longer limited to simply being able to travel in small little vents or little corridors. You can actually travel through a vast amount of space, much larger than the ones done in Dead Spaces 1 and 2, in which you were simply traveling on the whole of the ships that you, or locations that you were in. And I think that definitely adds a sense of exploration, because there are actually optional missions that you can take part of that add more to the story and give you more resources to build even cooler weapons. But despite these major advancements in terms of gameplay, in terms of sound design, level design, graphic design, it does have its share number of flaws, and I'd like to get into them. The two main flaws of Dead Space 3, at least in my personal experience through single player, is that the boss fights are generally some of the easiest in the entire franchise, especially the final boss. I'm not going to spoil too much, but the final boss to me was a mixture of taking the Flash boss in Dead Space 1 and a certain element in the final boss of Dead Space 2 and simply combining them. One is actually trying to kill you, while the other ones are meant as a distraction. And that is really how all the boss fights throughout the entire series have worked. And it's a real disappointment that the developers didn't try to actually make them unique. Another problem I had with Dead Space 3 is that the second character, John Carver, really doesn't feel like an actual character. And so they really unnecessarily added co-op without really giving you a sense of having to need to play in co-op. It's much more enjoyable, or at least it was for me, to play in single player, because Carver really does not add anything. You don't really get to know much about his character except that his wife and child were killed by the Unitologists. And from what I have seen from people who have actually played on co-op, he really doesn't do much interacting with Isaac. I mean, he's kind of like Isaac's kickstand and telling him that he needs to stay focused and we need to keep going, and are we going to make it, are we going to die, and, you know, he's basically the Robin between the pair of Batman and Robin. He's just there to motivate Isaac to keep going on. He's more or less just joining Isaac on his journey to destroy the marker source. And that is a true waste, and they really could have developed his character and maybe even throw in a little side mission or DLCs to get us to learn more about John Carver. Or it's, but it's also possible that they could be adding them in future DLC that I have heard that will be being released sometime next month. Now onto the verdict. Now, Dead Space 3 is a truly great game, and in a whole, it is very vastly superior than its predecessor, Dead Space 2. However, it still carries on in terms of story, the just extras of co-op, which was just not handled as well as it could have been, and the really lack of trying to make these boss fights feel differently. If you've beaten one boss in a Dead Space game, then the tactic really does feel the same throughout the entire series, which is why I'm happy. Even despite these small flaws, I'm happy to give Dead Space 3 a 9.5 out of 10. If they had fixed co-op and made John Carver a much more interesting character and made the boss fights excessively harder, then I would have given this a perfect 10. But despite this, Dead Space 3 also earns my first of only 3 nominations I'm going to give to games throughout the year of being a contender for my game of the year for 2013. If you like this video game review, feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to keep track of me in my future movie and video game reviews. And like always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.